I'm Natalie Berry. I'm editor-in-chief of ukclimbing.com, and I've been climbing for about 21 years now. I started completely by chance when I was about 9. I went to a shopping centre with my mum and dad, and they had one of those mobile climbing tower things in the car park. It was like an outdoor shop or something. And I had a go, absolutely loved it. And then, yeah, haven't looked down since. I've just been climbing for quite a while now. Like my family weren't climbers. I wasn't like outdoorsy as a kid, but I just got into competitions, realized there was a GB climbing team. You could do international competitions, traveled around the world doing youth competitions, making new friends. I didn't really climb outdoors much as a youngster. I was just training all the time at the gym. But eventually, like in my teenage years, once I got a bit more independence, I went on trips to Europe, like Spain, Font, Seus, Sirana, like all the iconic crags, and yeah, fell in love with outdoor and rock climbing. And now I kind of do a mixture of all different things. Like I stopped competing last year. I kind of had a big hiatus and then started competing again, and just with work it was difficult to balance. But yeah, trad sport, bouldering, competitions, a bit of alpine in winter. Yeah, it's quite hard to balance with work sometimes. But I love my job because I get to, it's relatively flexible, and it also involves writing about climbing and talking to climbers. So it's fun.
So what would you say sort of highlights have been for in your climbing history? Like what would you reckon sort of really stands out as memories for you?
I'd say when I won multiple British Championship titles. I won a European Youth Cup round, made like World Cup finals at junior level. I think some of my rock ascents I'm more proud of. My first 8B in France, that was quite a step up from what I'd done before. An E7 that I climbed in Scotland called Dalriada. It's like a really steep brow, and I didn't have much trad experience, but it was a route that I'd always wanted to climb, and I managed to do that. It's quite scary. And then my first 8A boulder, I did it in a few goes, like in a session in Magic Wood, and I had no expectations. Like I hadn't really project bouldered that much. I just kind of messed about and just had fun. But yeah, it just came totally out of the blue, and I'm definitely keen to do more bouldering.
Right. Awesomely hard. Yeah. Sense there. Any other big projects on the horizon? Like maybe not climbing related?
Yeah, I think work-wise, I'd like to do more writing for big publications like newspapers. I've got a few things in the pipeline. I'm also hoping to go to Tokyo for the Olympics to report on the Olympics, as I've got a press accreditation, but I don't know if it's actually going to happen yet. There's some sort of uncertainty, and I'm not sure, when it comes to that point, whether I'll want to go, if it's safe or not. But yeah, hopefully that happens, because it'll be really fun. And
yeah, that'll be quite monumental to get to Tokyo.
First ever climbing Olympics. So obviously you started your career as a competition climber, climbing indoors, and then you started moving into outdoor climbing. And then you've kind of progressed into editing and all your journalism and things. Was that a route you always thought you might go down, or did you kind of just accidentally fall into that? Or how did you transition into that kind of field?
Yeah, I think at school I always liked writing, and every time we had like a writing test to do, I'd always link it somehow to climbing. Like you're right about a time you had to push yourself, or you were scared, or you achieved something, and it was always like that was the easiest thing for me to write about. And then I did languages at university, so that's how the translation side came into it. I did French and German and a few other languages as well, like kind of on the side, or like small courses. I think languages and climbing go really well together, because you travel a lot, you meet people, and you're sharing beta, and you might not speak fluently, but it's just nice to know a few words. So I've always been linguistic and into reading and writing. I used to write reports about competitions. I like for small publications, like climbing publications. And then after I graduated from university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but a job came up at the climbing wall, the university climbing wall. I took that on part-time for a few months, and then a job came up for ukclimbing.com, an assistant editor. And I just immediately, I thought that'd be great. Like, it was work remotely, flexible hours, and I just applied and got the job. I think that was about 6 or 7 years now, so it's gone really quickly. I can't quite believe it.
So talking of translations and things, tell us, you've been working on the new font guide. It's a select guide. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Bleu Blocs. We didn't translate the title because we thought it worked well. It's basically a book about Fontainebleau. It's quite picture-led, so there's lots of nice photos and just short descriptions of about 100 of the finest boulder problems in the Fontainebleau forest. And it's quite a eclectic mix. Like, it's not like a traditional Fontainebleau book. It's not all the same problems that you've heard of in the same areas. I think I'd only climbed about 3 or 4 of the 100 problems, and I've not spent a huge amount of times in Font, but I've been a few times, and yeah, some of the areas are quite new and some of the problems were just more esoteric, but it was nice because it meant that there was some, like a good mix of historic problems and newer things I'd not heard of but which look amazing. So yeah, it was really fun to translate, but also quite tricky because when you're translating a specialist book, like there's a lot of sort of jargon that you might not know, others don't quite translate directly or literally. So I think there was one that was like talking about like little scratches in the rock, and it translated as like pork scratchings, and then he was talking about like cooking the pork scratchings on this boulder that looked like a oven, and it just doesn't work in English, and you have to try and reframe it. But it was fun. Yeah, translating climbing is much more interesting than prose or like corporate stuff. So it got me inspired to go back to Font for sure.
What's your sort of favorite bit then in Fontainebleau, or what have you got a favorite problem, or are there now sort of lots on a new tick list that you like to get over and do?
I've always liked the 95.2 and like the really sandy areas, because they're the first places that I went when I was about 10 or 11. We used to go on trips there with the British climbing team, and we were just there as kids, like digging like pits in the sand and like burying each other in the sand and climbing. Like, it was a fun holiday and a training trip, but it didn't really feel like work. But you were learning quite a bit about climbing because the climbing in Font's so technical, and you learn quite a lot about technique. I don't really have a favorite problem. Like, I've not really climbed that hard in Font. I usually just go for, like, when I used to live in Chamonix, we'd drive down and stop off for a day or two just to break up the journey. But yeah, there's a few good 7As and like the Toit de Col de Chien, and I don't know, there's just so many. But yeah, the sandy areas are my favorites, but there's definitely a few good areas that I'd like to go to, having translated the book. Got a big tick list now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Was it sort of designed to draw people away from the more popular areas then, to try and sort of make people a bit more aware of, like, there are some other really good problems to be had in the forest? I
think everyone on the first trip to Font, you go to like the traditional established areas like Bas-Cuvier, Le Font, but there's some like the book's split into about 3 or 4 different regions, and there's a lot more like new places kind of on the fringes, but they're not that much further, but just everyone goes to the honeypot places and where it's busier. But yeah, I think I guess sandstone's also quite a delicate rock, and it's quite nice for people to spread out onto new areas and not like totally erode the more popular places.
Obviously, as growing up as a competition climber, how do you feel about now that the competition climbing's made it into the Olympics, and what kind of impact do you think climbing becoming an Olympic sport is going to have on the wider climbing kind of scene, do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm really happy that it's become an Olympic sport. I think it deserves to be. Like I think it fits the Olympic motto really well, like faster, higher, stronger, like boulder, speed and lead. I do think there are concerns about loads of people getting into the sport and, you know, destroying crags and the environment, and I think that is a concern we're already seeing, especially after lockdown, like people just rushing out and not really caring that much about the environment. I think most people will stick to indoor climbing. They'll emulate like what they see in Tokyo. They'll go to the indoor walls. And if you look at the number of people who are like solely indoor climbers, there's still, I think it's something like, this is a few years ago, like almost like over 70% of climbers at walls only climb indoors these days. So, you know, that's reassuring. But at the same time, I don't want to be one of these people who's like, oh, they're all going to come outdoors, like the outdoors is only for me. You know, it's quite selfish. I think it's, if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's like how important the outdoors is for well-being and fitness and mental health. So yeah, I think we should encourage people to take up climbing and explore outdoors, but we have to educate people about that. And like the BMC have done a really good job, I think, of like easing people back into climbing outdoors, and people who've never climbed outdoors before, you know, educating them about how to climb respectfully and climbing ethics and looking after the environment.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and we just find it really interesting getting to chat to all these people that we kind of see the names and we see your photos in the articles and the reports and the content that you put out, and it's just really nice to actually be able to have a chat. And,
I know. Yeah, it'd be nice to have done it in person. It's just,
yeah.
You can travel.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for taking the time to chat to us.
Thank you for calling me. It's good fun. It's nice to speak to people.